All right, hello and welcome everyone. So first things first, if you are having any trouble hearing me or anything like that, just let me know. You can type in the chat. Also, if you have any questions throughout, just throw them in the chat. You don't have to wait for a certain point. I will open for questions at the end, but if you're like, I have a question now and I'll forget it if I don't ask it right now. I have the chat function open and available for that. So this is week 1 of Introduction to Birding. We'll have 4 weeks. Each week we'll kind of go over a few different things. We'll focus on a different group of birds. We do have two optional hikes involved with this course. So if you are interested in joining, the first one is on December 13th, which is not this coming Saturday, but the next Saturday. That will be at Clermont Park, which is over off of US 50, near, if you know where Pattison Park is, it's right by that. We'll do that from 9 to 11 a.m. My name is Kay. I am the head naturalist at Clermont County Park District. I'll be going through this with you all. We are recording every session, and I will have those recordings available within a couple of days. I'll throw those up on our YouTube, and I'll also directly email out a link to everyone so that you have a direct link to it and you don't have to try to search it down. If you miss a session or you want to review, those will be available. We also will have on December 18th as an option if you want to join in on some community science. We're helping out with the annual Christmas bird count through the Audubon Society. That's December 18th. It's a Thursday morning. We'll provide some hot chocolate and coffee for you at the beginning. We'll be over at Catherine Stagmar Park and Grailville Nature Preserve. And you can find the registration form for that on our website in the same spot where you found this registration form. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So week 1, we're going to go over raptors. Week 2, we'll talk more about waterfowl. Week 3, we're going to talk about backyard birds. Week 4, we'll go over some of the more unusual songbirds or some of the songbirds you might not see necessarily in your backyard, but that you're going to see, if you actually go out on a hike. So tonight we're going to start out doing an introduction to birding, an introduction to the introduction. And then we'll talk about a tool highlight, talk about binoculars, go over the ethics of birding, where to start when you're looking at identifying a bird. This week we're going to focus on raptors, on birds of prey. So we'll kind of do an overview of some of the most common raptors in Ohio. And then we'll finish out with our birding spot of the week, our recommended spot, and a way that you can be a bird friend. So to start, there's a lot of lingo that goes with birding that you might hear, especially if you join any birding Facebook groups or Discord servers or anything like that, or if you go on a hike with a birder. One of the main ones you're going to hear is somebody talking about a lifer. So a lifer is just a bird that you're seeing for the first time in your life. So if you're seeing a pileated woodpecker and you don't know that you've ever seen that one before, that's your lifer woodpecker or pileated woodpecker. There's also people that keep a life list, which is a running list of all the birds that they've seen. That can lead into down at the bottom a big year. So a big year is just a year where someone tries to see as many birds as possible within that year. So a lot of people will do that, or sometimes birders will do this, and they'll travel all over the world. They'll take a lot of birding trips, just trying to like rack up the most possible amount of birds. And then there's first of year, which I've heard used 2 different ways. One way is the first bird, like individual bird that you're seeing that year. So, January 1st, that first bird you lay your eyes on. Back a few years ago when we had a snowy owl that was visiting, Cincinnati, I talked to a birder after that who said that he got up on New Year's morning. He did not look out his window. He didn't look out his car windows. He drove straight to that park because he wanted that snowy owl to be the first bird he saw that year. I've also heard first of year being used as like the first time you're seeing that species that year, like, oh, that's my first cardinal of the year. So I'm not really sure exactly which one is more commonly used. I've heard both. Some of the gear that you might want to bring with you or might want to have, binoculars, which we'll dive a little bit into in the next slide. An option in addition or instead of binoculars is a spotting scope. So that's something that it's one lens, it's a bit bulkier. It also is definitely more pricey than just a pair of binoculars. You're probably looking at spending about the same that you would spend on maybe a camera when you're looking at a spotting scope, and it's stationary. So if you're like, I want to go to, East Fork State Park and set up on the beach and watch for birds and see what I see on the beach, a spotting scope is a great way to do that. You can just kind of set it up and then move it. Field guides, highly recommend. There's virtual books, all the different types of field guides, and we'll dive a little bit into that next week. You can grab a camera. If I'm choosing between binoculars and a camera, I tend to go with camera personally, just so that I can actually get the photo of the bird. With cameras, again, it's a little bit more of an investment, but it's not, you don't necessarily have to spend, $1,000 and have the 15 lenses in your bag. The picture you see here of an American kestrel was taken by me on a camera that was about the $300 camera. So a bit of an investment, but not insane. And then anything that you would normally bring with you on a hike to keep yourself safe. So insect repellent, first aid kit, anything, water, snacks, anything that you would bring with you on a regular hike, you will definitely want to bring with you while you're birding. Okay, when it comes to binoculars, the main rule of binoculars, rule number one, is set a budget before you go shopping. So when it comes to binoculars, you can spend $75. You can spend $3,000. My biggest tip is do not look through a pair of binoculars that you cannot afford to buy. Because if you look through that, $150 pair of binoculars and you're like, oh yeah, that looks good. But then you look through with $1,000 pair of binoculars, you can be like, oh man, that 150 pair of binoculars doesn't look very good or doesn't look as good now that I've seen, the best there is to offer. So definitely set yourself a budget. It's recommended that if you really want to buy a pair of binoculars that's going to be good quality, last you a while, it's worth spending at least $100, anywhere from $100 to $150 is going to be, a solid pair of binoculars. When you're looking at the specs of binoculars, you'll see these numbers. It'll say like 8x42 or 10x50. That's just the magnification by the lens diameter. And the lens diameter is of the objective lens, this lens down at the end that's facing away from you. So magnification would be 8, it'll make it 8 times bigger than it normally looks. And then it'll, the lens diameter is 42 millimeters, whereas, you get one that makes them 10 times bigger, and the lens diameter would be 50 millimeters. Something that's important to keep in mind there, those two are the most common sizes that I see for birding. If you are a person that is going to be taking longer birding walks, you may want to lean more towards an 8x42. The 10x50 will obviously, it'll make, it'll magnify more, but it's also bulkier and a bit heavier. So that is something to keep in mind as far as how much weight you're willing to carry with you right around your neck, or if you're getting a binocular harness, which is also an option. But just, that's added weight as you're walking. Um, Going over the ethics of birding, one of the biggest ethics of birding, especially if you are, even if you're just hiking, is leave no trace. So if you bring it in, bring it back out. Don't harass wildlife, minimize your interaction with wildlife. I have a photo of a glossy ibis here. Just this past summer, we had a glossy ibis that visited Cincinnati. It got confused, probably blown a little bit off course by a little bit of a storm. And it was visiting a local wedding venue. And so, of course, someone was at a wedding as a guest, noticed this bird and was like, happened to be a birder and was like, oh my gosh, glossy ibis, that's usually in Florida. Like, that's a very unusual bird for here. And so they got a picture, they posted about it, and then every birder in the region wanted to come see this bird. It's a way to tick off that lifer, add it to their life list, which was awesome. I mean, it's really cool to see that bird. And the venue was very generous in allowing people to come in. And they gave, certain times because it is private property. They said, you can come in from this time to this time. It's in this spot. Don't go anywhere else besides this spot, and don't get too close to the bird. And inevitably, someone did get too close to the bird, scared it off. It moved to an area where it was much more difficult to see. So don't harass the birds. Don't chase down a bird. Keep your distance. Think of yourself as an observer. You're visiting, and just treat nature like you would treat your best friend's home, or maybe a stranger's home. Also make sure you have permission to be there. Obviously, if you're on public lands, depending on the hours of operation, for us at Clermont County Parks, our parks are open from dawn to dusk. If you are interested in experiencing the parks after dusk, we do offer some nighttime programs throughout the year. Especially in the winter, we'll do some, after sunset hikes. We do have a couple of owl prowls coming up, or we'll be going out at nighttime, specifically listening for owls. So that's a great way to experience that, but you do have to be, if you are in our parks after dusk, you do have to be with a staff member. And don't trespass on private land. If you're interested in looking a little bit further into this, the American Birding Association does have a code of ethics for birding that I think covers this pretty well, of just how to be a responsible and respectful birder. All right, when you're coming to identification, there's a few things you kind of go down the list of looking at. One, look at the shape of the bird. Is it a goose-shaped bird? Might be a goose. Is it a duck-shaped bird? Might be a duck. A lot of birds have a very specific silhouette to them, especially as we'll be learning later on with some of our hawks, some of our soaring birds. They definitely have a very specific outline that can make it a little bit easier to figure out who's who. Look at the size. A red-tailed hawk is a lot bigger than a sharp-shinned hawk. So even if you're confused on the colors, just looking at the size can help narrow it down a little bit. Look at the colors of that bird. There's different markings. We'll talk a little bit about the kind of anatomy of a bird and like where those markings, when you say the breast of the bird, what are you talking about? What the belly of the bird? And learning to identify those individual colors. Season is a big one, not just for migration, but also for plumage. For example, our American goldfinch, which has beautiful bright yellow colors during the breeding season in spring and summer, The males become kind of a muted, almost a green color in the fall and the winter because they're not trying to impress a lady. Um, so even the same bird can look different depending on the season. And the season can, help you narrow down like, oh yeah, we do not ever have this bird here in the summer, so it's probably not that bird. Um, and then the location. Are you seeing it near water? That might help narrow down what kind of bird it is, or if it's, in a marsh or in a mature forest. Um, a lot of birds definitely have habitat preferences. So understanding some of the behaviors of those birds will help you to narrow down what you might be looking at. So getting into raptors. Unfortunately, we are not talking about this kind of raptor. A raptor is a bird of prey. There are 27 commonly seen species of raptors in Ohio. And when we say commonly seen, we mean consistently seen. It doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, if you go out, you're going to see this bird. Um, it can just mean, oh, yeah, we consistently year after year see this bird in this region. Um, this includes owls, hawks, falcons, vultures, and more. So to start out, we're going to get a little bit into owls. Owls have a really, really cool history as far as mythology and stories. Being a primarily nocturnal species of or family of birds, that has led to a lot of kind of fables about them. Anything that's out and active when we tend to not be um, is, more mysterious. We don't understand the message as much. It can even be a little spooky. So throughout history, owls have been seen as omens of doom, signs of good luck, bad luck, wisdom, foolishness, evil, witchcraft, and much more. Um, Here pictured we have the Greek goddess Athena, who was so closely tied with owls. She was the goddess of wisdom. Owls became seen as a symbol of wisdom. They were kind of her like spokes animal or her animal mascot. In some stories, she was able to transform into an owl. And there's even a family of owls or a genus of owls today that are the Athene owls. That includes the burrowing owl, which we have a little bit further south of here. The ancient Romans believed that owls were transformed witches who were using the form of an owl to go suck blood out of infants. Um, in Old England, some people believe seeing an owl brought you good luck. Some people also believed that nailing a barn owl to a barn door would help prevent lightning strikes. And this actually was a practice documented into the 19th century in England. So not great for the barn owls. In Greenland, they often would view owls as a source of helpful direction. So something kind of more symbolic, more beneficial. In Ireland, however, on ancient Ireland, they would see an owl entering any sort of dwelling as a very bad thing, that you had to kill that owl as quickly as possible because they believed that if the owl flew out of the dwelling, it would bring all of the good luck with it. And my personal favorite one, in Old Transylvania, farmers believed that if they wanted to frighten owls away from their fields, they could walk around naked and that would work, which, depending on the farmer, would work on a lot of things. Now, of course, we understand now, you definitely, if you're a farmer, you want owls near your fields because they eat a lot of things that are going to eat your crops. So they're helping you out, they're pest control. In Ohio, we have 8 species of owls belonging to 6 different genuses. They have a lot of really cool adaptations. Their feathers are specifically frayed at the edges. They have more space in between the little bark pieces of their feathers that allows air to flow through it and makes them completely silent flyers, which is pretty useful if you're hunting things that have really good hearing at nighttime. Um, their eyes, famously, they are able to turn their heads most of the way around. They can turn their head about 270 degrees and then turn it back the other way. They have 14 bones in their neck, which allows for that extra flexibility. And they do this because that their eyes are fully fixed in their heads. Their eyes are so big, they take up a big portion of their skull, and their actual pupils are shaped more like cylinders. So kind of that more like binocular shape rather than the round shape. That helps them to be able to see further. Um, they have asymmetrical ears. So you'll never, you won't ever be able to look at an owl and see where their ears are. Some owls have ear tufts, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Those actually aren't ears, but their ears are actually asymmetrical, so they'll have one here, one here. That helps them to triangulate sounds. So, for example, if you're a barred owl sitting in a tree and you hear a mouse rustling under a leaf, using those asymmetrical ears, you're able to triangulate where, like, what area of leaves that mouse is under. Makes it a lot easier to catch prey without actually having to see it first. And if you look closely at the feathers on their face, their feathers are kind of shaped like a disc. They almost form like a satellite dish on their face. That helps to catch sound and move it towards those ears. They also have a very unique method of digestion, since a lot of owls tend to eat things that are too big for them to swallow whole, or that eat things that are small enough that they can swallow them whole. They're not able to digest, the bones and the fur like a snake would, but they are able to kind of ball that up, package it up, and expel it as a pellet. If anyone ever dissected an owl pellet in school, it's a great time. Which actually, there's a lot of raptors beyond just owls that will expel pellets. The difference is that they don't stay together as well. Owls are just, for some reason, really good at packing them up. Whereas a lot of other like hawks, it kind of just explodes on impact and doesn't really stick together in that nice little package. All right, so our largest owl that we have in Ohio is a great horned owl. They're about a little less than 2 feet tall, so about 22 inches tall. They have a wingspan of about 44 inches, and they can weigh between about 2 and 4 pounds. That genus name, Bubo, means eagle owl. We do have one other owl that's sometimes seen here that is in that same genus. They are for sure a top predator. As far as owls go, when you think about an owl, like they're sometimes called a cat owl. Kind of gives you an idea of the size of prey that they can carry off. They can carry off something that weighs nearly twice as much as they do. They do routinely hunt groundhogs and skunks as well. They tend to prefer a more mixed habitat. So you're not really going to find a great horned owl in a mature tree stand. You're much more likely to find them in a younger forest, in more patchier woodlands where there's fields and marshes and things like that included. They don't really like that deep, mature forest. You probably have heard a great horned owl. They have the classic hoot sound. When you think of an owl hoot, that's what they say. That's a great horned owl. So they're definitely a cool one to hear. And they are rarely seen during the day. They are very, very nocturnal. There are a couple of our owls that you are more likely to see during the day, like our barred owl here. They tend to be out a little bit more often in the daytime, like in the evening or later morning. Great horns, you're not going to see that unless they're roosting. And even then, it's pretty rare. Our second largest owls are screech owl. They're about the same size. They're a little bit shorter, and their wingspan is about 2 inches shorter, but they weigh about half as much. They weigh between 1 and 2.5 pounds. So they're definitely not as muscled or as powerful as the great horned owl. They tend to hunt smaller things, though rodents. They're well known for hunting crayfish and amphibians. So if you ever go out in the early spring on one of our salamander migration hikes, we almost always hear barred owls because they're ready to eat all those salamanders that are up and moving. They also, one of my favorite things I've learned recently about them, if they eat enough crayfish, their feathers will actually start to turn pink at the tips, similar to flamingos, just from the coloring in those crayfish. If you're out and you find an owl pellet and it's got little bits of crayfish in it, it's probably a barred owl pellet. They do prefer mature forests. They really love areas that have lots of beech trees. They blend in really well with that tree, especially with that barred striping on their breast. It's a great camouflage spot for them. They are also a pretty classic hoot. It said that they sound like they're saying, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" And they are a pretty common one to hear. They're pretty chatty, especially in the breeding season. And they are, like I said, they're a little bit more likely to be seen during the daytime. For our barn owl, their genus name means a night owl. But the barn owls are native to almost every single continent. So you'll see them worldwide. They are about 16 inches long, so definitely shorter. They have a wingspan about 41 inches though. So their wingspan is almost the same as the barred and the great horned owl. They're just a little more petite. And they tend to weigh about half a pound to 1.5 pounds at most. They're considered threatened in Ohio. Their numbers have definitely dropped. Part of that is because they, in order to roost and to hunt, they really love like big tracts of meadows and grasslands and marshes. So this area, especially here in Clermont County, used to be amazing habitat for our barn owls with all of our swampy marshness. But unfortunately, as we have reduced that amount of habitat, they tend to not hang out as often. They mainly hunt small mammals, so voles, mice, things like that. They really like those grasslands. Barn owls are the true culprit behind a lot of ghost stories and witch stories. If you ever look up the sound of a barn owl, they sound like a demon screeching. They have this horrible sound. And if you think about how they fly silently, if you see, if you're out in your barn in the 1700s and you see a all white thing coming at you screeching, I would also think it was a demon or a ghost or something like that. Some of our less common owls to be encountered, we have long-eared owls. They're occasionally seen in the winter here. They will visit, but we are kind of towards the southern end of their range. These guys are about 15 inches long, so about the same size, about the same height as a barn owl. They have a wingspan of 36 inches, so that's about 3 feet, pretty big wingspan. They usually weigh about 9 ounces. So for reference, a pound is 16 ounces, so these guys don't quite hit a pound. Very, very light owls. They are a horned owl, and that's what that genus name Osseo means. So those ear tufts, they're just for display, for communication. They're not connected to the owl's ears at all. They don't really have anything to do with it. They tend to roost near large fields. And when they are near their roost, you'll hear these kind of big uniform hoots that are very, very deep from the males. The short-eared owl, same genus, definitely about the same size, but definitely has a less prominent ear tuft. That's this little thing up at the top of their head. They don't really put them up at all. You're really only going to see the ear tufts if they are sitting still. And you have really good binoculars. But these guys are about the same height. They have a little bit larger of a wingspan, a little bit, a couple inches more. And they do weigh a little bit more. They weigh about 12 ounces. The difference is short-eared owls are diurnal. So they are out during the day. They are active and migrate in the daytime. So you are much more likely to see a short-eared owl actually flying, actively migrating during the daytime. They love meadow voles. That's like their favorite food. Here, they don't really stop and roost in this area. They're mostly migratory through here, just kind of passing through. We are really at the extreme southern tip of their range. So they don't usually roost or breed here. They have a call that kind of sounds almost like a bark. More than a hoot. And our other diurnal visitor that we get is the snowy owl. So again, awake during the day. There's that bubo genus name, which means eagle owl. They are pretty rare in Ohio. They will visit, and we'll get one every couple years or so. And it's almost always a first year bird who's figuring out what all this range nonsense is. But they have a pretty big wingspan. They're about 23 inches tall, and they have a wingspan of about 52 inches. So that's a little over 4 feet. They tend to weigh about 4 pounds, so they are a bigger owl. They are one of the few owls that shows sexual dimorphism, so a difference in color based on the sex of the bird. So males are almost all white, females are spotty. So if you're a Harry Potter fan, the owl that played Hedwig was a male owl, because the females, so snowy owls, have these black spots on their breast, and I guess that's not as pretty if you're a film producer. But they have a very loud kind of booming hoot that the males will give, and then the females have a series of whistles that you're likely to hear out of them. And then we have a couple of little guys around here. So the eastern screech owl is our smallest year-round resident. They are about 8.5 inches tall. They have a wingspan of about 20 inches, and they weigh 6 ounces, which is about as much as one of those little mini water bottles. That's about the weight of a screech owl. Their genus name means great little horned owl. So they do have those ear tufts, just like a great horned owl. Again, those are used for communication. They are by far the most common owl in Ohio. There was a Christmas bird count, I think it was in 1982, where a group found 112 screech owls at the same site on the same day. So they're pretty common. If you're out looking for them, you'll probably see them or hear them if you're really like putting in the effort. They give more of a whinnying whistle than a hoot. They don't really screech either, unlike their name would suggest. They kind of whistle. They prefer kind of scattered tree lots. They like to have those open fields to hunt in. And they do have 2 color morphs. So here I have a red colored morph. They also have a gray color morph. If you're going up towards the top end of the state, you're not going to see the red color morph as often. It's definitely more common down in this area, but we'll see both the red and the gray around here. And then in the winter time, we have an even tinier visitor. So the northern saw-whet owl comes down here in the winter. This is warm for them. They like to stay up in Canada in their breeding season. Their genus name, the Aegolius, means a kind of owl. So that's an owl. They're about 8 inches long. They have a wingspan of a whopping 17 inches, and they weigh about 3 ounces. They're tiny, tiny. We used to think that they were a really rare visitor, but it turns out it's just that they are very hard to find. So there are some groups that have been doing consistent banding on northern saw-whet owls over the last few decades, and have been really logging those birds and seeing how long they live, where their migratory range is, how often they come back, doing some studies on them. They like to breed in coniferous forests, which is why we don't really get breeding populations here. Our only native evergreen is the eastern red cedar, so we don't have those big groups of, big groups of coniferous trees for them to roost in. They're a little unusual as far as their hunting behavior. They have been known on good nights to hunt more than they're actually going to eat at that time and to actually stash food for later, which is pretty unusual. Most owls just eat what they catch right away. So moving into some of our other raptors, this is a great visual for looking at that kind of shape. As you were talking about, if you're just looking at the shape and the size, that's mostly what you're going to be doing with a lot of raptors, especially hawks and vultures. They are, a lot of times you see them soaring up in the sky, and so having the ability to look up and just go off of the general size and the shape of them, that will help you to be able to identify them pretty easily. So our most iconic hawk, I think, is our red-tailed hawk. They're a voice actor, so that, eagle screech that you hear in movies, that is actually a red-tailed hawk screech. They have a wingspan of about 49 inches, so a little over 4 feet. They have these rust-colored tail feathers. So if you see one soaring, if it's got, a red tail, it's a red-tailed hawk. They also have this dark streaking across their belly, and they have kind of a dark tip to their wing, to the top edge of their wing. They also, if you watch them as they're soaring, they don't flap very often. They're a bigger bird, and so they're not as easily moved by gusts of wind. And so they kind of have like a more slow, lazy flap. Then we have our red-shouldered hawk, which is about the same size. Their wingspan is about 40 inches, so just a few inches smaller or shorter than the red-tailed. You can tell them apart by looking at this kind of dark patch on their wings. They also have these kind of narrow, you can't see them super well on this picture, but they have these kind of white bands on their tail. And they will have those kind of rusty colored shoulders. They're also very noisy. So they have more of a, less of a screech and more of kind of a screaming call. And they do tend to be talking as they're soaring. I don't know why, I don't know what they're saying, but boy, are they saying it. And if you see one perched, they've got that very iconic kind of red shoulder to them. Both of these hawks are known to reuse nests year after year, and can stick around the same territory for quite a long time. So if you have, at this park right here, I'm at Clermont Park, which is our main office. We have a pair of red-shouldered hawks that have been here for at least the last 3 years, and we see them pretty consistently. Less commonly, we have broad-winged hawks, which have about a 34-inch wingspan, so definitely smaller than the other two. If you see them soaring, they've got this white band in the middle of their tail. And they're small and they have what is described as a chunky stature. So they have this kind of round body. They prefer to be in large areas of mature woods. So not as common to find around here, but definitely still possible. We did see one last year here at this park. That was really exciting. I tried to get a photo and he refused to stop for me. He wanted to go hide in the trees. Occasionally we'll also get rough-legged hawks. They are definitely bigger. They have a wingspan about 53 inches. They have this white tail with a dark band at the end. So the only other bird really that has a white tail like that is the bald eagle, or an immature golden eagle. And if it doesn't, I mean, the rough-legged hawk is about half the size of a bald eagle, a little over half the size, and it doesn't have that white head. So the kind of silhouette is a bit different. They do have two different color morphs. So they have a light morph and a dark morph. That dark morph, it's mostly on their back, and they will look almost entirely black when they're perched somewhere. And then extremely rarely, because they are considered state endangered, we do occasionally see northern harrier hawks. They are a decent sized bird. They've got a wingspan of about 43 inches. They have these dark tipped wings, and their wings form this kind of V shape. So it kind of comes to that point and then back down. And they have these dark bands on the tail. And then if you see one, you can't see it on this one, but if you see one perched, they have this white patch right on their rump, right on their tail feathers, on their back. That is pretty iconic to harrier hawks. They are also one of the few bird hawks that has sexual dimorphism. So males tend to be more gray, and then females and immature harrier hawks tend to be this kind of reddish brown. We have a couple little guys around here. Our Cooper's hawk is about 31 inches in the wingspan. They have a rounded tail. So these two hawks are pretty commonly mistaken for each other. One of the ways you can tell the difference is Cooper's hawk have rounded feathers at the bottom of their tail. Even if they have their tails splayed out, it kind of rounds at the end. Sharp-shinned hawks have this squared off tail. So sharp shins are sharp. They're also, when they perch, their wings are rather short, so their wings end up folding several inches above their tail feathers, which can also be a key to identifying them if you see them perching. Female Cooper's hawks are known to be pretty fierce when they're defending their nests, and have been known to even come after humans. They are not really scared of a lot, despite being pretty small. They're a common winter resident of this region, and they are a pretty good hunter of other birds. So they'll hunt kind of smaller, medium-sized birds. They also are known to raid bird feeders. And Cooper's hawks used to be in the genus Accipiter with sharp-shinned hawks. They just recently, last year, changed genuses to the genus Aster. So reclassification happens fairly often when it comes to birds and plants and all kinds of things, especially as we learn more about the DNA of these animals. Sharp-shinned hawks are definitely smaller than Cooper's hawks. They're about 23 inches in their wingspan. They have that squared off tail. They have very quick wing beats, so they tend to flap pretty quickly. And then they have these beautiful stripes underneath their wings. They're less common to see in the wintertime than Cooper's hawks are. A lot of them will migrate south. So you're not as likely to see them out there, but they're a pretty small bird compared to the Cooper's hawk. And they are often affectionately called Sharpies by raptor enthusiasts, which I think is very fun. As far as falcons go, we have two common species of falcon in Ohio, peregrine falcons. Usually are seen near cliffs, skyscrapers, power plants, places where they can get up high because they do that iconic dive. They can dive and hit up to 210 miles per hour while diving. So they like to have a nice high perch to get to that. They have a wingspan of about 41 inches. They have a very light body with these bands across it. And then they have this, what's called a mustache stripe on their face. That's pretty iconic to just the peregrine falcon. They are one that it's important to note, like the location. If you're near, there's if you go down to Meldal Dam, down on the Ohio River, there's a couple of high tension towers over there, and we were seeing peregrine falcons there last year. There was a pair around there last year. So if you're in an area that has really high spots like that, you're more likely to see a peregrine falcon. But if you're in a very flat region, it's probably not a peregrine that you're seeing. They also will hunt cooperatively when they have a bonded mate. They'll work together to hunt, which is pretty fun. They will hunt shorebirds, waterfowl, songbirds, and some populations of peregrine falcons are even known to eat bats. Then jumping down quite a bit in size, we have our American kestrel. Very common. I usually see them perched on power lines. Next time you're driving around, especially if you're near some fields and you see what might be a mourning dove on the power line, look again because it might also be a kestrel. They have a wingspan of about 22 inches. Pretty small, not quite 2 feet. They have these black bands around their eyes, and they actually also have sexual dimorphism. So the males tend to have this big gray head and gray on their wings, whereas the females tend to stay brown on their wings and have just less gray on their heads. They are very noisy and they have a big attitude. So you'll definitely hear them, and they're not scared of of things that are bigger than they are. They're pretty feisty. You can put up a kestrel box, which you can find the dimensions for online pretty easily if you look that up. And that will help to give them a place in a nest. They are known to use kestrel boxes. And we actually have a few put up in our parks that we just put up this past year. So hopefully this coming year they will start using them. We have osprey, which is not quite a falcon. They're kind of their own thing. They are one of the very few raptors that eats almost exclusively live fish. They're super cool. You will see them roosting near water. They can actually dive under the water to catch a fish and can come back up and still fly. Pretty amazing. They have a wingspan of about 63 inches, so a pretty big bird. They have that white belly, dark wings. They've got this dark stripe by their face. If you see them near water, it's probably an osprey. They do tend to migrate south for the winter, so you don't see them as often around this region in the wintertime. And then we have a more rare falcon that's sometimes seen. This is a merlin. They have a wingspan of about 24 inches, so slightly bigger than a kestrel. They have this dark tail with white bands on it, a broad chest with all these streaks on it. They do flap their wings pretty rapidly, and they have this pretty dramatic point on their wings. They are known to reuse old like crow, raven, hawk nest, but they rarely return to the same nest year after year. They are relatively rare to see in this region, but we do see them sometimes, usually in the wintertime. We have two whole species of vulture here in Ohio. We have turkey vultures and black vultures. So turkey vultures are bigger. They have a wingspan of 72 inches. They have that red head. They have a longer tail. Their white feathers extend across the full length of the wing. And they are, because they're bigger, again, they're not just like that red-tailed hawk, they're not as easily buffeted by air gusts. And so they have these nice slow flaps. They don't tend to flap their wings as often. Vultures are scavengers, they're nature's cleanup crew. And they have an amazing sense of smell, which helps them to actually smell out carrion. They can be seen as a little bit creepy, but I'd rather have these awesome vultures around. They have some really interesting behaviors as well. I'd rather have them around helping clean up than to see lots of rotting dead animals all the time. Then we also have black vultures. They are smaller. They have a wingspan of about 54 inches. They're entirely dark. They have a gray head, a black body. They have this white on the very, very tips of their wings. So if you're watching, and you see some vultures circling overhead, if their wing is straight across and it has these white tips just at the very end, that's a black vulture. If their wings have more of a V shape to them and that white feathers are all across the wing, that's a turkey vulture. Black vultures tend to work in groups, hang out in groups. They will share food with each other. And one of my favorite things, I think every time I see a group of black vultures around some carrion, they all seem to be taking turns. So there seems to be like 2 or 3 that are actually eating, and then a few that are just kind of like standing around waiting their turn. And they are monogamous. They will return to the same mate year after year. All right, the last raptors we'll talk about today are our eagles. So the bald eagle is very iconic, national bird. They have a wingspan of 80 inches, so very big bird. They are the second largest raptor in North America, second only to the California condor. So they're definitely the largest raptor you'll see in this region. They have a white head, white tail as adults. Juveniles or immatures have a brown head. It can take them up to 5 years for their head to fully turn white. But you can also kind of identify them. Their wings will form a straight line as they're flying. They tend to have a very level silhouette. They are known to bond with the same partner year after year and be pretty monogamous, but apparently they rebound quickly. So if one partner is killed or passes away, they will usually find another partner by the next breeding season. They are one of our best conservation success stories. There were 4 nests in Ohio in the 1970s, and with some regulations put in place to limit the use of pesticides. They have now rebounded to the point where I believe the last count was over 800 nests last year across the state of Ohio, which is really amazing that in just 50 years they have rebounded to that level. It's amazing. They don't have a beautiful screech like we would like to think. They almost sound like seagulls. They don't sound very intimidating. They also are known to be kind of scavengers, a little bit of bullies. They're commonly seen near landfills. And they are also known to take fish that osprey have already caught. But they're a beautiful bird, really exciting to see. And then occasionally we'll get a golden eagle. You'll usually see them, they're pretty consistent up by the Lake Erie shoreline in the wintertime. They don't breed in Ohio. There's been no record of them breeding in Ohio, but they will visit. They have a wingspan of about 79 inches, so just slightly smaller than the bald eagle. Yeah. All right. So running a little bit low on time. So our birding spot of the week is one of our parks, Crooked Run Nature Preserve. It's down on the Ohio River. It borders one of the few undeveloped backwater areas of the Ohio River. It's the only state-owned nature preserve in Clermont County. This is a photo I took of a bald eagle at Crooked Run Nature Preserve. There are several different bird viewing blinds along a flat trail. It's a great place to see warblers in the springtime, but a lot of like ducks and eagles and osprey and cormorants and a lot of really cool water birds and waterfowl. It's a great spot to see them. Over the last 25 years, we have listed over 200 species of birds just at Crooked Run Nature Reserve. So it's a little bit of a drive down to get down there, but it definitely is worth it. You'll see some cool birds. And then ways to be a bird friend. The highlight this week is lights out for migration. So light pollution is one of the biggest threats to birds. We are right about here. This shows migratory like activity. So we are getting pretty high as far as migratory activity around in this region of Ohio. Light pollution can disrupt their wayfinding. It kind of messes with their instinctual magnetic field. And window strikes are a big problem, especially at nighttime when you have your lights on and it's, you don't really see in as much. It just reflects what's outside. There's over 1 billion birds that die from fatal window strikes every year, worldwide. So close your curtains, close your blinds at nighttime. If you have outdoor lights, either put them on a motion sense timer or you can do both. Put a cap over them so that they're facing downwards to reduce that light pollution. But there's some really cool ways that you can kind of passively help out our local birds just by monitoring how much light pollution you contribute to. All right, so that will bring us to the end of week 1.